Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all to the sixth lecture on the subject management organizational policies and practices. Before we start with the lecture itself, I would like to give you a recap of lecture 5. That was on strategic human resource management. I gave you a brief introduction on what strategic human resource management is, what are the different elements of human resource management, who are involved in the process of human resource management, what are the different management styles followed by the managers, such as they have different style of management for the contractual workers vis-a-vis for the full-time workers, for the permanent workers, for the part-time workers, and so on. I also give you an overview of what are the different human resource management goals, and we discussed in detail why those goals are critical. So we discussed the labor productivity and cost effectiveness as one of the critical human resource management goals. What are the factors that make that goal critical? How it is important for the firms to stay productive as well as cost effective at the same time. And then we discussed some other goals, and we had a detailed overview of the different human resource management practices that an organization can employ, or that are the other detailed goals of the organization. We also discussed the different strategic tensions that an organization faces. For example, the labor motivation tension. How is labor motivation a tension for the organization? We had a discussion on this in detail. Then we had a discussion of the two different views, two different schools of thoughts related to what the strategic human resource management practices of an organization, or which strategic human resource management model an organization should adopt. So the first one of this was the best fit school of thought. And according to the best fit school of thought, an organization should see the situational factors or the context in which it is operating, and it should decide its human resource management policies accordingly. So the organizations that are, so it should try to have two kinds of fits. One is the external fit, and the other one is the internal fit. External fit relates to the alignment of human resource management practices with the organizational corporate strategy or the business strategy, and internal fit is the alignment of the human resource practices internally. So within that internal fit, we had a look on three kinds of fits that an organization needs to achieve, which was the consistency fit and temporal fit, consistency fit. We also had a look at the different critique on the best practice view of human resource management, and one of the important criticism that we discussed was that since this view talks only about the alignment between the organizational strategy and human resource objectives, and it talks about the different fits that should be aligned with the organizational strategy, it overlooks the role of employees, or it overlooks the rights of employees, or it overlooks the needs of employees. It does not talk about the fit of human resource practices with the needs of the employees. For example, it does not talk about how the employees, how much longer the employees will work with their working hours. It does not talk about their work-life balance. It does not talk about their compensation plans, etc. So and that was one of the most important criticism that was that this theory had to face. Then another criticism that this theory had to face was that it's the nature of human resource management is pluralistic. But contrary to that, it only talks about one or two of the fits. Then we had another view, which is the best practices view. We had a detailed discussion on that view, and I will just give you a small overview here of that view, which is that any organization which is operating in any part of the world, irrespective of the context and irrespective of the situational factors it faces, irrespective of the sector in which it is operating, irrespective of the industry in which you are operating, irrespective of the governmental or political laws that an organization has to face, there is a number or a set of human resource management practices that if used by the organization, it would be successful. So an example could be if an organization is using structured interviews, they definitely have an advantage over the unstructured interview process, right? And so the hirings that are done through the structured interviews, they are going to give you better fit between the person and the organization than the hiring that is done through the unstructured interviews. So and similarly, training and development, if an organization adopts wherever it is operating, in whichever industry it is operating, it is going to be beneficial for the organization compared to another organization which does not use the training and development practices. The underlying rationale behind this theory is that since all these human resource practices, they increase the employees' ability to perform, they increase their motivation to perform, and they provide them better opportunities to perform through, for example, the better autonomy and more coordination between the teams, and better communication, more participation. So all these practices are part of this this set of best practices, right? So all of them together increase the employees' ability, motivation, and opportunity to perform, and thus increase the performance of employees. That is why the theory ignores the context, and it says that these practices are best wherever, however, in whatever circumstances you use them. But the criticism on this theory was that one size does not fit all. There are various organizational, even there are certain governmental laws and regulations which prohibit certain organizations from adopting certain kinds of policies. Right, so you just cannot altogether adopt certain kinds of policies as per the legal laws of the state or the legal requirements. For example, I gave you the example of Japan, where it's not possible to lay off an employee once you hire the employee, and there is a concept of long-term employment there, long-term long life security, employment security. So if you are in a country like Japan, you cannot lay off the employees, and you have to devise some other alternate business strategies to enhance your firm's flexibility. So that is why context is important. That is the main criticism on this theory. And other main criticism on this theory was that the set of best practices it is talking about, the theory is talking about, it's not clear that which set of best practices it is. Some theorists or some authors, they have given a set of 5 to 6 practices which they term as best, and some have given a list of 10, 18 to 20 or even more items in the as best practices which should be used by the organization. But which bundle of the best practices should be used, that is not clear. So we discussed the critics of the two views in our previous lecture, and with this we end up with the recap of lecture 5, and we move towards lecture 6. Today we are going to discuss ethics and social responsibility. What you can expect from today's lecture is, after discussing or after listening to today's lecture, you should be able to discuss how the nature of management jobs creates the possibility for ethical abuses. Then you should be able to identify common kinds of workplace deviance. Then you should be able to describe what influences ethical decision making. And you should be able to explain what practical steps managers can take to improve ethical decision making. So you know that managers have great authority over the functions, over the tasks that the employees are performing. They're the direct supervisors of the employees. So the first line managers, if we talk about them, they have the authority to supervise the task, or they're responsible for supervising the task of their employees, right? And we had a discussion on how there are different levels of managers, the lower level, middle level, and upper level managers, and all these three levels of managers, they have some authority which is associated with their position, with their legitimate position in the organization, that they have the power. They have the coercive power, they have the reward power, and they have the legitimate power to exercise certain options. The managers, they can allocate the resources, they have the authority over the resource allocation, and they have the authority over the employees, that in what direction they have to take the work from the employees. Manager behavior needs to be ethical to promote ethics in the organization. Managers can do many kinds of things which, as per their authority, they can do, but they are unethical, such as they can mishandle the resources that are provided by the organization. They misuse the organizational resources over which they have power to use. For example, if you start using company car for your personal purposes to pick and drop your children, or the company driver to pick and drop your children, then that is misuse of resources. That is the personal use of organizational resources, and that is unethical. Similarly, if you start using the company computer or the company laptop for personal purposes, that is also an unethical use of company resources. Then handling of information is very important, because managers, that they have to play the role of spokesperson on the behalf of the organization, right? They have to play the role of figurehead, so they are representing organization at various levels outside the organization, as well as, of course, they represent the organization inside the organization, but they also represent the organization outside. So when they're performing all these different roles and duties, they have certain responsibilities when it comes to the dissemination of information. First, they are the receivers of the first-hand information or the second-hand information. They receive the information, they assimilate that information, and they are also responsible to disseminate that information properly. So that is one of the responsibilities of the managers, not to withhold the important company information and to disseminate that information to the organization. It also has to disseminate the information not only within the organization but also outside the organization to the other stakeholders of the organization. For example, they are responsible for sharing the information on the company's financial statements, on its financial ratios, or on the dividends to the stakeholder, to the shareholders of the company. So one responsibility of the manager is the dissemination of the information, and the other responsibility of the information is the accuracy with which that information is disseminated to the different parties involved, right? So if managers, they try to play with the information, or if they're trying to play with the data so as to show a promising picture of the organization, then that is again an ethical use of power by the managers. So they should not play with the data, and they should not misuse the data, and they should not doctor the data, right? And then we have that they can influence the behavior of others. Managers, of course, they have the power to influence the behaviors of others, just as I talked about earlier. By others, we mean that the direct subordinates or the employees who are being supervised by the managers, they have the so this influence on the behavior of the employees, that influence can come from the role model the manager themselves are providing. So if they are themselves engaged in the acts that are unethical, then it would give signals to the employees that ethics is not important to the organization, and playing unethical is normal. So one is that the employees will be directed to involve in the acts that are unethical. Secondly, the managers can sometimes intentionally involve the employees in unethical behaviors. For example, asking them to do this much amount of sales irrespective of or to make this much amount of production or give this much amount of output irrespective of the quality of that output, right? And they themselves ask them sometimes to play with the data and do some certain other tactics which are important that their employees do for the organization or for their department to meet their targets. So the goal setting that is done by the managers, that can have significant influences on how the employees behave, right? The goal setting done in the organization can significantly determine the ethical behavior of the employees. If the goals are set too high by the managers, it might not be possible for the employees to attain those goals, and they may start playing unethical to achieve those goals. So I have here two studies for you as an example on how people generally behave. We have almost 30 MBA graduates of Harvard University. They were once, data was collected from them, and they reported that most of them were asked by their managers to misrepresent the data, to play with the data and misrepresent the data and get the desired results from their research. May that results be harmful for the quality of the product, and may that results lead to the product not meeting its standards. They were still forced by their managers to produce the faulty results, but which are desirable outcomes as perceived by the managers. Then in another study of 1,324 respondents, it was found out that 48% reported unethical behavior. That is, 48% reported that yes, there is an engagement in the unethical acts or undesirable behavior, such as cheating expense account, then forging the signatures, then cheating on co-workers, etc. These are some of the behaviors that have been reported that they are common. The 48% of the respondents, they had this report. And 60% of these respondents, they believe that management has its role to play. So if the management has its commitment towards ethical behavior in the organization, and it displays that ethical behavior itself, it can these figures can considerably fall. So that was the belief of 60% of the management. And it is true that most of the employees, they are highly influenced by the requirements at the workplace. So their ethical or unethical behavior is largely dictated by what kind of environment they have at the workplace, what are their job demands, and what are the demands of their manager, and what are the pressures that they are facing on job. Let's discuss the case of Wal-Mart. I have a few examples, very interesting examples for you from Wal-Mart, that the kind of strict ethical policy Wal-Mart is following. It is very strict guidelines for its employees as to what is ethical, what is unethical, or what is the code of ethics, and how they have to behave in certain ways, and if they do not behave in those ways, if they behave unethically, what are the punishments for them. It is very clearly stipulated in the code of ethics of Wal-Mart. For example, if the employees, they accept anything of value from their clients or from their customers or from the suppliers or vendors in the shape of gift vouchers, in the shape of tickets, air tickets, in the shape of dinner or any sports event, they will be dismissed from the company. And the laws are so strict that the employees are even restricted to accept even a cup of coffee from their clients or from the supplier or from the vendor. Then they have the employees, when they are scheduling some meetings with the vendors or with the suppliers, those meetings are supposed to be held in classrooms, so that any kind of unethical act, for example, if it is taking place between the employee and the vendor or the supplier in the form of exchange of some gift, etc., that can be visible from the corridor. Anybody can see what's happening inside the glass room. So just to keep a check and just to keep strict controls and to make sure the ethical policy of the organization is being followed, they have this system of glass rooms, and on the doors of those glass rooms they have posted the posters which are saying that anything received will be returned to the sender on his expense. So this is the kind of the signals the Wal-Mart is giving to its employees. So we just discussed that how the nature of management jobs, it's sometimes the managers, they have the pressures, they themselves have the pressures of deadlines, and they themselves have pressures, for example, of sales target that the department or their unit has to meet, and they are translating those pressures to their employees to get the job done. So managers, of course, they have a greater responsibility in this kind of situation, because they are the direct implementers of the organizational policies and practices, and they're the people who are setting the guidelines for the employees and who are setting the expectations on how the employees are supposed to behave. So they must use the company resources appropriately. They must handle the company information confidentially, and they should not influence others to engage in unethical behavior. They should not create policies that reward employees for unethical behavior, and they should set reasonable goals. So I gave you a few examples of how the managers, they should use the company information ethically, or it should use the resources of the company ethically. So it is, for example, normal for the employees in the organizations to, or for the managers, or for the representatives, or for example for the sales representatives, or for the corporate managers in the organizations to take their clients for dinner outside. But what if the manager is using the company jet to fly to another city for a business meeting, but the manager also stops in the way to some other city for a home visit, right? So that is, of course, that is unethical, and that is again a misuse of company information. I have another example of Sears for you. Sears is one of the leading automotive repair company of the world, and one of the very big companies, and it's restructured its incentive system in order to increase its overall output, and in order to increase its overall sales and profitability. The company restructured its incentive system such that they linked their the commission of their employees to the number of the batteries that they are replacing, the number of the shock absorbers that they are replacing, and the oil changes that they are making. So as a result of that, of course, what happened was that the interests of the employees, which is higher pay or higher commission, that directly was in conflict with the interest of the customers, which was honest repair work. The employees, what they were basically doing was that they were making the unnecessary repairs, or they were the quality of the repair that was jeopardized, because they were trying to save the time and sell to some more customers in that time. So they were more emphasizing on the quantity, because their rewards were commission based, than quality. Quality was suffering, and secondly, the unnecessary repairs were being made, and unnecessary parts were being sold to the clients when they were not required, which tremendously was increasing the cost of the customers, and secondly, it was also suffering from the quality, the repair work, and the output given by the employees. So there were huge number of complaints from the customers in around 40 states. Result was that the company identified the problem, and they reversed their policy of linking the incentive systems, the commission to the commission of linking the commission to the number of batteries sold, or number of shock absorbers, or oil changes made. So the incentive system was revised again. So what is happening here is that the company management is adopting a policy for the company to be more productive, but it is encouraging counterproductive behaviors unintentionally. So sometimes the policies of the organization, sometimes the policies devised by the managers, they can be intentional, and sometimes those policies devised by the managers can be unintentional, right? So management needs to be aware that what is promoting unethical behavior at workplace. So workplace deviance is basically when you are deviating from what is from the principles of right and wrong, and you are not behaving in a way which is in accordance with the accepted norms of right and wrong in the organization. There are basically two dimensions of workplace deviance. One is the one is the degree of deviance, and the other one is the target of deviant behavior. So degree of deviance can be from minor to major. There can be major deviance in the organization from the workplace behavior, and there can be a minor deviance. Then the target of deviant behavior, that can be the organization and that can be the particular individual himself or herself, right? So it can be the individuals or it can be the organization. So let's have a look at these in detail. We said that the workplace deviance can be of two types, one the organizational deviance and the other one the individual deviance. When we talk about the organizational deviance, it is the production deviance and the property deviance, and we talk about the individual deviance, it is the political deviance or personal aggression. So what is production deviance? Production deviance is basically when your quality of your work is being hurt or when your output is being hurt, right? You are producing less quantity of output or you're producing the less quality of output, right? So both are the examples of production deviance. So it happens when the employees are, for example, leaving early from work, right? They're taking excessively long breaks, etc. And in such cases, what's happening is that the production is being directly hit, their output is being directly hit, whether that be the quality of work or for example, they can be not very much present-minded in their work, they're absent-minded in their work, and that is resultantly the quality of their work is being affected again, or they have some stress in their work life or in their personal life, and as a result of which the quality of their work is being damaged. So there can be a number of factors, result of which can be the disruption in the quality and the quantity of the work. So all these behaviors are basically unethical. When you are performing such behaviors, they are unethical behaviors. Then property deviance is another form of workplace deviance. Here what happens is that you are again performing unethically, which is aimed at company property, right? So examples can be sabotage, stealing and damaging equipment from the company, etc. A study reported in the US that almost $1 billion a year or $13 billion, which forms almost $13 billion, that is accounted to towards the shrinkage costs that the retailers have to bear on the part of the unethical behavior performed by the employees, right? So that could be the you're sabotaging the company equipment or damaging the company equipment or stealing from the company, that is costing around $13 billion to the retailers in the US every year, which is a huge amount or a huge number. So of course this kind of data is not available for the countries like Pakistan. Then we have the political deviance. Political deviance is of personal nature. So that is when someone is trying to harm someone else or the co-worker, for example, in the company, such as the manager is trying to do the favoritism with some co-worker, is trying to spread some rumors about some co-worker. So as a result of those rumors, they can be defamation of the character of an employee, and that is political deviance, or you are trying to falsely blame others. That is also a form of political deviance. So sometimes what managers do is that they, out of favoritism, they in their performance appraisals, they try to promote some of the workers. They're trying to giving undue favor or unduly positive appraisals of some of the workers, and some of the workers that they don't like, they try to make or they try to create situations so that the workers themselves weak, such as negatively filling their performance appraisals, right, and giving them a defame by spreading false rumors about them and talking badly about them in front of others, right, so that portray them as bad workers in the eyes of other people and in the eyes of the other seniors, right. So this kind of acts, they all fall under this political deviance, and they are directly hurting the individual or the employee in the organization. Then we have the hostile or aggressive behavior towards others. That is another form of workplace deviance, which is personal in nature. When you're being violent to others, when you're showing hostile or aggressive behavior towards others. So examples of this kind of deviance are sexual harassment, verbal abuse, and threatening others, etc. A study shows that 1,000 people per year, or 3 per day, they were killed at work. That is a study in the US. There is a report of a study that was carried out in the US, and it also shows that police officers, guards, store owners, and the company managers, they are the most affected victim of they are the most effective category of the people who fall under the personal aggression from others, from the other employees or from others. We see that organizational deviance is the production deviance and the property deviance, and I have given you a few examples of the production deviance, such as leaving early, taking excessive breaks, working slowly, or wasting your resources, wasting the company resources, right? They're all the examples of production deviance. Then we have the examples of property deviance, such as you're sabotaging the equipment, company equipment, you're accepting kickbacks, you're lying about hours worked, and you're stealing from the company. These are all the examples of organizational deviance. And then we have the political deviance, such as you are showing favoritism, such as you are gossiping about your co-workers, you are blaming your co-workers, and you are competing non-beneficially. And then you have the personal aggression, which is the sexual harassment, that is the verbal abuse, stealing from co-workers, or endangering co-workers. They are all the examples of personal aggression. So of course they can be all these kinds of deviances, they can be from minor to major. They can have minor consequences in the terms of minor harm which is being caused to the organization or to the individual, or they can also cause the major or more serious harm to the organization or to the individual. What are the outcomes of workplace deviance for the companies? Of course, the companies, they can be prosecuted and they can be punished even if the management is not aware about the unethical behavior that is being performed by an employee or by a manager in the organization. Sexual harassment, for example, if we take its case, and if every company is supposed to have, as by law, sexual harassment, there are certain sexual harassment standards, rules and regulations which are also stipulated by the states nowadays. The companies generally also have a policy on sexual harassment. What would be the grievance procedure, what would be the reporting procedure in case of sexual harassment, and how the cases will be treated, and what will be the penalties to the accused person. So if your customer, if the co-worker of the company, or if the supervisor of the company that is engaged in the act of sexual harassment of the co-worker, then that of course the organization or the company is directly responsible for that act. In case of lawsuit, the company has to prove its case. But if it's the company customer who is doing that act because who is harassing the employee at the organization, then what is the position or what is the standing of the organization in that case? Because the act is taking place at the workplace, and if that act in an organization is in somehow responsible for that act taking place from the client or from the customer, such as the uniform of the staff is such that it is leading to the advancement of such acts by the customer, then the organization is also held responsible for that sexual harassment. So how ethical decisions are made? Let me give you an example here, a real case I'll discuss here with you, and then I will ask you a question of what you would do if you were to resolve that case or that situation. Richard Adasseh, it is the case about Richard Adasseh, who has been working with IBM who worked for IBM for almost 29 years, and he died just 4 months before it was going to be 30 years completed of his work with IBM. Right? And the policy in IBM is that after completing 30 years of service with the company, an employee is entitled to full retirement benefits and pension plan. So it was a very cold day when it was very stormy weather, when most of the people, they were taking their days off from the company, but Richard Adesi, he got up and he shaved and took his shower and was getting ready to go to the office. Just as he was leaving for office, he suddenly had a heart attack and he fell off the heart attack and he died there. So he left behind his wife and daughters. So in this case, what the company should do, what benefits the company should pay the wife and the kids of Adesi. If they pay the, also considering that he was a very loyal and he was a very senior worker and he was a very serious worker with the company. His father had also been with the company from last 30 years. He also served the company for 30 years. Now if they give Adesi full benefits, full retirement benefits, it becomes $1,800 a month and full medical coverage to his family. But if they do not give him full benefits, that is, if they give him the benefits that should be given to an employee who is short of 30 years of service, then they are $340 a month, with a pay, which is of course considerably less than $1,800 a month, and the family also has to pay $473 a month on account of medical coverage to continue getting the medical coverage. So this is a lot of difference between the two sets of benefits that the family can get depending upon the decision made by IBM. So in your opinion, what decision should IBM take in this kind of scenario or in this kind of case? Let's go to the future slides, have a discussion on how ethical decision making is done, and then try to reach our answer. So ethical decision making, that is basically influenced by the ethical intensity of the decision. It is influenced by the moral development of the manager, and it is influenced by the ethical principles that are being used. Ethical intensity of a decision is further determined by a number of other factors, such as magnitude of consequences, social consensus, probability of effect, temporal immediacy, proximity of effect, and concentration of effect. So before we move further, we have a discussion on these key concepts. Ethical intensity. So ethical intensity is degree of concern of people about an ethical issue. So how concerned the people are about the ethical issue, what is the intensity of that ethical issue. So there are certain issues which people are more concerned about, and there are certain issues which they are not that much concerned about. Then the different factors which are measuring ethical intensity of the issue, such as the magnitude of consequences. What will be the total harm or what will be the total benefit that is derived from an ethical decision? Then the social consensus, agreement on that behavior of whether that is good or bad. What is the general public saying? Are they agreeing? Is there a consensus between them on whether a certain behavior is good or a certain behavior is bad? Then the probability of effect, which shows that the chances that something will happen and then it will harm others. Right? For example, it's written on the packets of the cigarettes that smoking is injurious to health, or it causes cancer and a number of other lung diseases and respiratory tract problems. So, and it has also been proven by research that there is a linkage between smoking and these diseases. So it means that smoking will increase the probability of effect that something will happen, right? So the people who are smoking, they are much more prone to these diseases than the people who are non-smokers. So it increases the probability of effect. Then we have the temporal immediacy, which is the time between an act and the consequences that act produces. So if a manager has to lay off the workers after 7 days, then if the worker has to lay off the workers after 3 months, that is temporal immediacy. Then the proximity of effect, which is the social, psychological, cultural or physical distance between a decision maker and those who are affected by the decision, right? So a co-worker which is working with a manager compared to that a staff worker, right? So that is the proximity of effect, how much attached you are psychologically, culturally, physically or socially with the affected person. And then the concentration of effect, which is the total harm or benefit that an act produces on the average person. So concentration of effect is again the total harm that you are being or the benefit that an act will have on the average person. Let's try to first go back to the case of Richard Edesi that I just told you. If we come back to the ethical intensity and the factors that are determining the ethical intensity, we would see that 5 factors out of the 6 were present in the case of Richard Edesi at IBM. Let me tell you first the decision that IBM made. IBM decided not to give the family full benefits such as the full insurance cover and the full amount of monthly payments of $1,800. If we view that decision of IBM in the light of these factors, we would see that there was a magnitude of consequences. That is, it was clear that this is the total harm that this decision is going to have on the family of Edesi, which is, as I told you, that if they get in total it was 1,800, and if they get it partially, not the full amount, then it is 340. And then we have the magnitude of consequences, and then we have the social consensus. Well, most of us will agree that IBM did the right decision, but there will be many of us as well who won't agree that IBM has done the ethical decision. They would say that it was really unethical from the company to make this decision. They should have given the family of Edesi full benefits, because he is left over a wife and daughters, and his wife is also a housewife from last 20 years, and it won't be possible for her to start some work again or do some work after 20 years of staying at home. So in this kind of situation, most of us, they might be really identifying with the family of Edesi, and they might be thinking that it was unethical by IBM not to give full benefits to his family only because he was just 4 months short of his service. So probability of effect is, as I told you, it's the chances that something will happen and it will harm others. So of course we know that if their family would be paid this much, what would be the harm that will be caused to the family. Then the temporal immediacy, that of course the decision, that when will the decision take place and when it will affect him. Of course the decision will affect their family immediately. And then we have the proximity of effect. Most of us, they are identifying with the family of Edesi and not to the IBM. So we are both psychologically and socially and culturally identifying with the family. And then the concentration of effect is also there. That is the total harm or the total benefit that is being caused to the average person. So average person here is the Edesi's family, his wife and his kids. So out of all these factors, we see that except for social consensus, the decision made by IBM was supported by the other factors, except for the social consensus. Many of us don't have this consensus that it was an ethical decision, and some of us have this consensus. Then the other factor that leads to the determination of the ethical decision making, or that influences the ethical decision making, is the moral development. At what stage of moral development you are. So there are 3 stages of moral development that have been explained here. One is the pre-conventional, The other one is thus conventional, and the last stage is the post-conventional stage. At pre-conventional stage, what is happening is that you are making certain decisions because you are playing selfish, right? Only because of your self-interest you are making certain decisions. And in conventional, you are making decisions because of the societal expectations, and in post-conventional stage you are making certain decisions because of your internalized principles. So the decisions in the first domain are more selfish, and in the last stage they are more mature. There are again two stages each of these stage. So for the pre-conventional stage, we have the stage of punishment and obedience. Here you are doing something because you feel that it would not be good for you, or it would harm you. And then we have the instrumental exchange, where we are doing something because we feel that it will benefit us. Here let's first take an example of a person who is being offered by his co-worker a copy of the software, Microsoft Office, right? And the person, he has not, of course, bought that CD from the market, that software from the market, or he has not bought that software from the Microsoft, who has the copyrights, right? Now this person who is getting that software, he immediately has his self motives that if he copies that software to his computer, then he is going to make some certain PowerPoints, he is going to make certain presentations, he is going to develop some other documents, etc. And he is going to work a lot on this. And on the other hand, he also knows that Microsoft won't ever be able to know that he has unlawfully obtained that software. Even if Microsoft knows that he has obtained unlawfully that software or illegally, Microsoft is not going to do anything about it, because he is a very small fish, and Microsoft runs after big fish or after big companies who illegally take the softwares of the company and then distribute it among their employees. If we see if the employee is at the pre-conventional stage of moral development, and he's at the instrumental stage, which says that employee will act selfishly and in his own benefit, he will only try to see his own benefit. So here what he will do is that he will just copy the software, knowing that Microsoft won't ever be able to trace him. So he'll just copy the benefit and make use of it, the software, and make use of it, right? Now you have this conventional stage, which is the first sub-stage in this conventional stage is the good boy, nice girl. So here you are making certain decisions because many people are doing like that. So if in the case of that guy who has got the Microsoft Office software for free, if he sees that many of the people are doing the same, they're also copying the software like that, he will also be doing that, right? Because he has a justification that as many others are doing the same. Then the law and order. You do certain things because it is lawful, and you don't do certain things because it is illegal, and you might be penalized for that. Right? Then we have the last stage, which is the most mature stage of moral development, where you are making your decisions because of your inner moral values. So the first one is the social contract. Here you are entering into a certain decision, you are making certain ethical decision because it is the rights of the general public, or it is good for many others, or it is the right of many others, and if you won't do it, then it will be to their harm. For example, in the case of Microsoft, again, that boy, if he is at this stage, he will not copy the software because he will believe that it will be violation of the rights of Microsoft, right? And then we have this universal principle. Universal principles are your own personal beliefs of what is right and what is wrong, and your own ethical beliefs of what is right and what is wrong, and they might be different from law, from what law says, and you're still following your beliefs because you are so sure of your beliefs, and those are so internalized beliefs that even they supersede what law says. If you believe that something is ethical, you will be doing that. So here, such as if that someone is socialist, if he belongs to socialist state, if he is a socialist, then he will be copying that software, in this case of Microsoft, because the socialists, they believe that nothing belongs to, or nothing is the property of any single individual or any corporation, but it is the property of the society at large. Here, from this, we can also conclude that the decisions that we make, they can have several dimensions. They can both be illegal and unethical. The decisions, they can be legal but unethical. They can be ethical but illegal. And finally, the decisions can be both legal and ethical. So there are certain principles that also guide the decision making. One is the principle of long-term self-interest, then personal virtue, then we have this religious injunctions, then we have the government requirements, utilitarian benefits, individual rights, and distributive justice. Let's see them one by one. The principle of long-term self-interest, where the individual is going to make a decision which is in the long-term interest of the individual or for the organization. So this principle might look selfish in the first sight, but it actually is not. For example, you're always trying to save for your long run, right? You're trying to make savings because they will be useful for you in the long run or for your contingency plans, and you do not spend all the money altogether in your current period eating pizzas or sitting in the restaurant, right? So you are not fulfilling your short-term objectives, but you're fulfilling your long-term interests here, right? Then we have the principle of personal virtue, where never do anything that is not honest, that is not open and truthful, and that you would not be glad to see reported in the newspapers or on TV. So if we again refer back to the case of Edesi and IBM, we would see that this decision of IBM was really badly reported in the Wall Street Journal. It was reported to be an unethical decision made by this company. So if that company would have followed this principle, they would not have made this decision. Then there's this principle of religious injunctions, according to which never take any action that is not kind and that does not build a sense of community. So any decisions that you or your organization takes, they should build a positive sense of community in the organization, and that should build a feeling of kindness amongst the community. So again, referring back to the case of Edesi, then the IBM, in order to promote this sense of community and kindness, that should not have taken the decision of not giving full benefits to the Edesi's family. Then the principle of government requirements, which is that never take any action that violates the law, for the law represents the minimal moral standards. So if we again refer back to the case of Edesi and IBM, actually IBM made their decision based on this principle. They followed what was the minimum requirement by law. So as per law, as per their policy, the family of Edesi was not entitled to full benefits, right? And then this principle of utilitarian benefit, which says that never take any action that does not result in greater good for society. So here, if we have a very crisp overview of the Edesi's case again, we would for a while we might feel that here it was the decision was not for the greater benefit, because the decision was made kind of against the family. As I told you earlier, that his wife was just a housewife for the last 20 years. She was not working and she had two daughters to take care of as well. So in this case, we might feel that IBM should have given full benefits to the family. But if we try to broaden our vision, we would see that if they had given these benefits to Edesi, it might have led to the company suffering in the long run, because at IBM at any point in time there are almost 1,000 workers who are nearing retirement, right, or who are entitled to full retirement benefits. So that is a huge number of people. So if it starts giving benefits to all those people, then it would lead to lesser and lesser share price of the IBM, and it would lead to lesser profitability of IBM, right, and their lesser market share. So this was not in the interest of the more number of people. Then we have the principles of individual rights. That is, that never take any decision that infringes on others' agreed upon rights. So here again, if IBM had granted full retirement benefits to the Adesi's family, it might have violated the individual rights of other people who were also nearing retirement, right? And of course it could not give those rights to everyone who is nearing retirement, because they have a policy as per which all the employees, they are entitled to those benefits only when they have 30 years of service. Then we have this principle of distributive justice, as per which never take any action that harms the least among us, the poor, the uneducated, the unemployed. So again, as per this, the decision that the IBM should have taken should be for the Adesi's family, if they had followed this principle. So from all these principles of ethical decision making, we see that different principles, they lead us to different answers, right? Some of the principles, according to some of the principles, IBM did right, and according to some of the principles, the decisions made by IBM were unethical. So what are the practical steps to decision making? First one is that you need to select and hire ethical workers. Then you need to establish a code of ethics. Then you need to train your employees to critical decision making and create an ethical climate. So first, the select and hire ethical employees. It says that if you found how the ethics training, ethics selection and hiring can lead to positive outcomes, and what are the kinds of tests that are involved. One is the overt integrity test, and other one is the personality based test. Before going to talking more about these tests, I would give you an example of what the Reader's Digest did once. Was that they put $50 in almost 120 wallets, and they placed those wallets all over in different places, in the urban areas and in the rural areas, and in the areas where the managers and the other workers were working. So it was a very random sample on whom in whose area these 120 wallets, they were spread with the money and with the complete ID card and the complete information of the person to whom those ID cards could be posted and at what address they could be posted. So out of those 120 wallets, what happened actually was most of the wallets, they were returned without that $50, right? So that is basically an example of the unethical behavior that people generally perform. So but some of the wallets, they were not, they were returned incomplete, in a whole. So what here is the role of the personality of the individual, and what here is the role of the different tests of the individual. At the time of the hiring, what the organization can do is that it can conduct these overt integrity tests. So these tests, they basically help reduce the workplace deviance, and they help hire workers who can perform better. Out of these integrity tests, for example, you can ask your the prospective candidate that whether he will make a purchase from a seller who he knows that he has stolen the products, right? And or you could ask them, your prospective candidate, that how much people they often steal at the workplace. So if the people, they generally perceive that this kind of unethical practices or this kind of dishonest behavior is common, so those who will be unethical, they would mostly be saying yes. to these questions, right? And another way of conducting this your selection and hiring process is by way of their personality tests. Of course, there are certain personality traits that are stable and that cannot be changed over time. Some individuals, they are more prone to certain acting or behaving in certain ways than other individuals are. So if you can make some personality tests which can check the sense of responsibility, which can check the dutifulness and the conscientiousness of the prospective candidates, those tests can also be very helpful in selecting the employees who mature on the ethical behavior at the workplace. We have some research findings. We have some data which shows that overt integrity tests and workplace deviance, they are very strongly related. So the probability that of the individuals who are being selected after the overt integrity tests, that is 82%, that those individuals who have been selected after taking these integrity tests, they would there are 82% that chances that they would perform less workplace deviant behaviors, or they will less be engaged in the deviant behaviors. So 32% is a very big number. It is a very big ratio percentage. And then we have also a result for the personality based integrity tests and the workplace deviance. So if there are 68% chances that the people who were tested on their personality at the time of hiring and who showed ethical behaviors, depicted ethical personalities or ethical behavior at the time of their personality tests, they had 68% more chances of not being engaged in these counterproductive behaviors such as workplace deviance. We have also these tests which are related to performance. So these tests also increase the probability of performance. So the individuals who are hired after conducting the integrity tests, they are 69%, they have more chances to perform better in the organization than the organizations who are not taken such tests from. And then the individuals who are have bad were tested against their personality, whose personality based tests are taken, they are 70% more likely to perform better on their jobs than the individuals who have not been tested for these personality tests. And similarly, we also have our report for the integrity tests that are conducted for theft, that 57% of the candidates, who are being tested on integrity, they are less likely to do any theft in the organization compared to the candidates who have not been tested. So the next step, one is the hiring and selection, and the next step that the organization can do is that it needs to establish a code of ethics. The code of ethics basically communicates the code of that what is the expected behavior from the individual of right and wrong, and what will be the different punishments and what will be the different rewards which are associated with the performance or non-performance of that behavior. And also this code of ethics, it should be communicated very well both inside and outside the company. We have an example of Norton Networks, who have developed a very well developed code of ethics both for the internal and for the externals. So anyone can view this on their website. Then ethics training, that of course is very important, that needs to be provided to the employees, and that can be really helpful in promoting ethical behavior at the workplace. So it develops the employees' awareness of ethics, and it activates achieves the credibility with the employees, and it teaches a practical model of ethical decision making to the employees. Right. So there are different ethical trainings. There are different kinds of ethical trainings, such as some organizations they engage into hiring the external consultants or hiring the coaches to ethically train their employees. But it has also been reported that this kind of trainings or this kind of coachings, they are overly theoretical in nature, and they are not as much close to the actual real workplace dilemmas that the employees they are facing. But on the whole, these trainings can guide employees as to what is the model of the decision making and how they have to deal with certain ethical dilemmas, such as it can deal with how they have to identify the problem, right? They need to ask themselves what is actually the problem. Then they need to identify the constituents, the persons who are being involved, the person who are being harmed, right? Then they can diagnose the situation, that how it happened, why it happened, can we undo it. Then they need to analyze their options. What are the different options, what are the different possibilities that are available to deal with it, what are the different costs associated with the different kinds of decisions that if those kinds of decisions are made, what are their associated costs, right? And then they make their choice out of those different options that are available to them. So the choice, they should also take care of whether they will be reporting their final decision to the customers, to their suppliers, to their clients, to their manager, to their bosses, to the general public, and how would they react while making the final choice. And then finally, when you have made your final choice, they are trained on how they have to act. Once they have made a choice, then you have to be confident on that decision, and they have to stand with that decision. Ethical climate needs to be established. That is really very important, that there should be an ethical climate that should be established in an organization and should be promoted in the organization. And again, the role of managers is really critical in establishing the ethical climate in the organization. First, they need to act ethically themselves, because they are taken as the role models by the employees in the organization. So whatever the workplace behavior the managers are performing, employees are likely to perform. Then they're active in company ethics. They need to be active in company ethics programs. Especially the commitment from the top management is really important in the ethics trainings, courses or the training programs or ethics programs. Then they need to report potential ethics violations. They should be reported, and it should be encouraged that those violations that are taking place at any level in the organization, that they be reported. So the role of whistleblowers is very important here. The whistleblowers, they often fear that if they report any such unethical act, they fear that they would be penalized instead of penalizing the person who is performing the unethical behavior. But nowadays, increasingly in most of the states, there are state and federal laws that promote the rights of the whistleblowers. So the organizations should also promote the whistleblowers to make an environment, to make a climate which is more conducive for ethical behaviors and ethical decision making. And it is really important that those who are not performing ethically, or those who are violating the code of ethics, they must be punished, to give a strong message from the organization. So with this, we conclude our today's lecture, which was on ethics and social responsibility, where we discussed the different roles of the managers, and we also had a discussion on what determines the ethical behavior at workplace, what are the different influences on ethical behavior at workplace. I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. Thank you for your patient hearing. See you in the next lecture. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.